Cooley. I'm a fifth year at Latham Watkins, specializing in the private equity finance space. We represent borrowers who are entering into mainly acquisition financing transactions. I've been at Latham for, it'll be 4 years in March. I lateraled from another firm in New York in 2017. I went to NYU for law school, and I also was on the national board of NBLSA when I was in law school. So great to be with you all today.
Good evening, everyone. Hope you all can hear me okay. My name is Danielle McCall. I am a fourth-year associate in the DC office of Latham & Watkins. I have been with Latham now for 2 years. I am a litigation associate, but I split my time pretty evenly between our complex commercial litigation practice and our white-collar criminal defense and investigations practice. I primarily focus on healthcare fraud. Before joining Latham, I worked for 2 years as a clerk on the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, clerking for the best judge ever, Judge C. Darnell Jones II. And prior to clerking with Judge Jones, I graduated from Penn in 2016. It's really great to see you all.
Mr. Joyce.
Sure. Hi, I'm Eamon Joyce. I'm a partner at Sidley. I've been a partner at Sidley for about 10 years, and I've spent, except for my clerkship, my whole career at Sidley, going back to when I was a summer. I clerked on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit for now Chief Judge Roger Gregory. My practice, as Jalen mentioned, is Supreme Court and appellate. So I really think of it as a generalist practice. The skills I apply are the same across cases, but I argued a case about defamation the other day. I had a False Claims Act case the week before. I argued a natural gas pipeline case 2 weeks before that. So it is probably the thing that's in some ways most similar to what you do in law school, oddly enough. And thanks for having me.
Mr. Graves. You're still on mute.
I think you're on mute, Matt.
The better?
Yes.
The old double mute. You would think after 8 months or whatever it is of working in a pandemic, I wouldn't still do that, but yet I persist. Matt Graves, I'm in DLA's DC office. I'm a partner. I've been in DLA's DC office for about 4 years. I joined DLA from the government. I was with the U.S. Attorney's Office in DC for about 10 years, where I spent most of my time working on fraud and public corruption related matters. Since joining DLA, my practice has really tracked basically what I did in the government. It's a combination of internal and government facing investigations. And I also just also do some random civil litigation as well, based on all the trial experience that I got when I was in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Ms. Robertson.
Good evening. So my name is Ferlia Robertson. I'm also a partner at DLA. I'm based in our Chicago office. I am in our IP litigation group, where my practice largely focuses on IP litigation, largely trade secret and patent litigation, as well as counseling. So I'm usually involved in those cases when you have company A versus company B suing over patent infringement, or they're fighting over trade secrets. I've been here at DLA for 5 years now. Before DLA, I was at Kirkland & Ellis for a little over 8 years. And also while in law school at Northwestern, I was actually on the National NBLSA board as well. So I'm always happy to come back and participate. So appreciate you guys for having us.
No problem. Thank you for being here. So first I will start off with a few general questions for each of you to jump in on. So the first one is really centered around getting rid of the misnomer of whether attorneys actually want to talk to law students. So some students are worried about whether attorneys have the time, or are we a bother? So if we can first address that, do attorneys actually want to network with law students and speak with them? We can start with Mr. Graves.
Yeah, I know. I think our presence here tonight shows that we very much want to interact with law students. And as Verley was just saying, you know, a lot of people mentored us along the way, and we definitely want to pay it forward and want to become part of your network. So we're more than happy to participate in events like this and help you chart out what it is you want to do with your careers.
Mr. Cooley.
Yeah, I would echo that. Also, I think just from a typical recruiting perspective, you know, all of our firms are built on the model of recruiting new talent. And so the only way that we're going to be able to do that is to be able to speak to students. And a lot of times, especially on the corporate side, you don't get a lot of exposure to what we do in law school. So there's no way for you to know what you're going to get yourself into unless you kind of speak with us and vice versa. So we're definitely interested. And I always tell students, you know, if you think you're going to bother someone, just send the email. We know how to respond to emails. We know how to manage our calendars. We know how to manage conference calls. So we'll figure it out, and definitely put your foot out there and try to get in touch with us.
I'll even take it one step further to say, personally, for me, talking to law students is probably one of the best parts of what I do. While I enjoy trial, I enjoy going to court, being able to really, you know, stay connected to what's coming behind, what sort of where you guys are going, to me, really just sort of shines a light on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, right? Particularly when you're dealing with the day-to-day grunts of trying to recruit, it just staying connected really personally makes me feel that much more joyous about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So for me, it's probably one of the most enjoyable parts of what I'm doing.
Ms. McCall, anything else?
Yeah, I was going to say that I 100% agree. I should have noted previously that I am on Latham and Watkins DC's recruiting committee. And so I spend quite a bit of my time talking with law students. And I have to tell you that the people that actually reach out to me and I get an opportunity to have a conversation with, those are the ones that I feel more invested in, right? We see a lot of resumes come in, we see a lot of transcripts come in. Everyone here works at amazing firms. And so everyone here gets candidates that have, you know, all of the right credentials. And so, you know, being able to talk to you, get to know you, know your interest, you know, be able to hear your interest in our firm, all of that allows for us to see aspects of you that we might not be able to get solely from looking at your application materials. So I would absolutely encourage you to reach out and don't be discouraged if you don't hear back immediately. You know, that within a few hours, we do see it. And as Donald said, we know how to get to those emails and we will get to them eventually. But I do want you to know that, you know, I'm often fielding emails from other associates, you know, begging to jump in on someone's interview or be a screener. So I know firsthand that there are a lot of people excited to speak to you.
Mr. Joyce.
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of what's been said here. One thing I'll add is I found this process back when I was in the attendee shoes just really intimidating. You know, I'm not from a family of lawyers. I didn't know any lawyers. Thinking about big firm life or anything in the law, really beyond going to law school and knowing that I wanted to someday clerk seemed really mysterious. And it should be. It's weird. Like what we do is weird, and how these places operate is not intuitive in any way. And look, I think everybody on this thing today has probably benefited from somebody leading us through these processes. And, you know, consistent with Matt's comment about paying it forward, this is really hard. And so it's good to get people at entry level to talk about what they want to do with their careers and how they think they can apply their skills and what have you, recognizing that you can really benefit from the kind of tutelage that people on this panel can give.
Drawing off that point, for the partners that we have on the call, can you talk a bit about sometimes students are hesitant to contact a partner versus an associate. Can you shed some light on perhaps how they should go about doing that? And if, again, partners are also willing to talk to law students. We often hear about how busy you all are, and you know, you're overseeing a practice group and you've got a lot of different things going on, various committees. So can you just talk a bit about if a student is considering contacting a partner, let's say that they don't know, how should they go about doing that? And feel free to jump in as you see fit.
If you don't mind me jumping back in, I mean, I start smiling because look, I still feel like the same kid I was at 22 in a lot of ways, right? Like this happens all the time when I talk to junior associates or law students or whatever, and they ask me like, oh, what do you like to do? And I feel like I like to do the same stuff I always did. I like to see my friends and go to bars and have a real life. But I get it at the same time, right? Like I remember when I was back in your shoes and I was a 2L in a summer associate program. It was crazy intimidating, just what the partners seemed like they had done and what have you. But starting with me still feeling like the same person I've always been, reach out. Like if I don't have time at the time, I'll let you know. But there's no downside to reaching out. Don't be intimidated by the hierarchy as perceived or real. We're happy to help.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I understand where the question is coming from. To me, I just have to laugh at anybody feeling intimidated about reaching out to me, but I get it. I mean, the other thing I'll say, right, is that, you know, when you're in law school, you hear the term partner and you kind of have this like monolithic view that everybody, it's all the same. The partnership is the same, right? And in some ways, and legally, yes, it is. But as a practical matter on a human level, when you break it down, when you're talking about partners, you're talking about people that, depending on the firm structure, range in age from like 35 to 75. Those of us kind of on the more junior end of that scale actually feel a little bit closer to you in terms of our outlook in life and what we want to do than our partners on the other end of that scale.
I would echo Matt's comment. That's literally why I laugh. First one, because I'm not old. No one can tell me that I'm old, even though I'm a partner. And so at the end of the day, we are in fact just people, regular people, right? And so for me, as I mentioned, I personally enjoy connecting with the students just from my own personal journey, because you guys have so much to share and going on and interesting things that I learned so much from you all as well. So we are just, put aside whether it's, senior in-house counsel, GC, to just counsel person, leave the titles alone. We are just genuine, decent, regular people, whether partner or not, that really want to help. So I would always say encourage folks the same way that you would call an associate or call a friend, email a friend, just shoot us an email, give us a call, and don't be concerned that this is a person that may be too busy or a person that's a leader in this or a title of X, Y, and Z. So.
For Danielle and Don, we're being a bit closer to our most of our demographic on Zoom. Can you talk a bit about how important networking has been for you both in your career in terms of getting the opportunity that you both have, but continuing to do that throughout your career as a young associate, as you move to becoming a senior associate, and then if you have partner aspirations, moving on to that.
Sure, I'll go first. So I do think networking is very important. I think some people it comes more natural than others. And so I think sometimes when I get on these panels, I try not to stress like, if you're not an A1 networker, all hope is lost. I think there are different ways to approach your path, especially at law firms. I have found though that outside of the formal mentorship opportunities that a lot of firms have, just being available to talk to people, getting outside of my office and meeting people in the hallways and getting involved with recruiting has been helpful, because I think sometimes it's really easy to be siloed to your specific practice group. And so, it's great to have, sponsors and people that are lifting you up in your practice group. But if you are trying to progress, you're going to need more people outside of your practice group. So you can't just kind of be in your office and on doing your own thing. The summer programs, albeit, this year we've all lived in a very different world, but usually I think the summer programs, or when first year associates start, is a good way to get connected to other groups, because everyone's being a little bit more social. There's a lot more events. And so I definitely would encourage associates, especially new associates, to go there. Also, if you're on a team, asking a partner if you can just sit in on calls. Even though if there's nothing for you to do, that's a good way of also networking and being available as well. Just so you can show that you're interested and ask your questions. A lot of times, I think email has let us kind of hide in our offices and hide behind our computers. So actually being in the room and being at face that people know and a name that they recognize is really important as well.
Yeah, so building off what Donald said, I like Donald, I am someone that did not find networking to be like natural for me, especially when I was in law school. But then I joined one of the most social firms in DC, and I didn't know that I had the option to not get to know some of my colleagues. And I have to say that the benefit is just immeasurable. I've had so many different ideas about the type of law that I wanted to practice. Came in thinking that I might want to do appellate work, then thinking that I wanted to do strictly complex commercial, and now finding this really sweet spot for me and kind of in between white collar and complex commercial. And it was because I had the opportunity took the opportunity to talk to different people. And get insight into the work that different people do, what they like about that work, what they don't like about that work. So I used networking to understand, what my colleagues were doing and what opportunities might be available to me. And I continue to do that. So now that I am kind of getting more senior at the firm, thinking about progression options, thinking about whether there's a place for me at the firm long-term, whether I want to stay at the firm long-term, I'm having these discussions still, and I'm networking and reaching out to partners in other offices and counsel in other offices, senior associates in other offices, and just getting a sense of, again, what options and opportunities lie ahead. So, the networking never stops. It's not that once you get your firm offer, you're done. As long as you want to continue to progress and do well at your firm, it's important to continue making those connections both in and outside of the firm. And I should say that to the extent that that wasn't clear, I definitely reach out to people in other firms as well. And again, just try to get an understanding of what they do.
And Jalen, can I just add one quick thing? And this is something that I was talking to some other law students just the other week about, and something that I wish folks would have told me while I was in law school is that networking starts where you are right now. Literally, your peers, your classmates, those will become some of the closest relationships that you will encounter through your careers. They may be your clients eventually someday, your next partners. You never know. So don't think of it as just networking externally in terms of trying to get something or to actually get a job. But if you view, and I know you guys are busy, it's a whole lot going on, but really consider the idea that you are networking each and every day. The process for you guys starts really, really now.
Thank you. A question that we have in the queue is, okay, so for those students who networking doesn't come to as naturally, what are some practical things they can do to get better at it? So some of you have mentioned it's never ending. We can work on it with our friends while we're in law school, and you're always continuously getting better at it. But are there any things that work particularly for any of you that helped you become a better networker?
So I know that I feel better when I feel prepared. So I do my homework. And there are ways to not come off creepy, like you have, researched someone to the T and know all of, their high school drama business and know where they grew up and all of that. There are ways to not come off in that way. But I do take the time to, see if I can look at the person's firm profile, just do a little bit of due diligence before talking and really think about what I am hoping to get from the conversation, not necessarily staying married to, an outline for the conversation, but things that I know that I want to hit, things that I know I want to discuss, and just use that to kind of guide it. So yeah, for me, preparedness makes me feel less nervous about the process.
So I want to jump on and amplify for Lilia's point, because we're talking about networking and we haven't yet defined what networking means to each of us and how you go about networking. And I think like the most effective networks are kind of what for Lily was talking about, right? It's like people that you have real connections with. Like you can come up with, and it's a good idea to say, you know, who might I potentially be able to get exposure to at law firm X or company Y, and kind of have that list. But what you're going to find over the course of your careers is the people that like you wind up coming back to and that you have the deepest connections with are the people that you went to law school with, who, you know, 20 years from now are the GC of some company, or the people that you were associates with, who are, you know, if you're in a government facing practice now, leading the sections that are investigating your clients, or maybe they're in-house as well. It's always good to have a plan, and you can have ideas in your mind of who you want to make connections with. But honestly, what I found is like the most important part of networking is just trying to form relationships with the people that you're currently that are currently in your institution, whatever that institution might be. And then maintaining when you leave. And it's hard. That's the hard part in my mind, is like, because that takes effort, like reaching back out to college friends, to law school friends, to people I was associates with, to people I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office with. That's the hard part, but I would encourage people not to be intimidated by actually going out and meeting people, because the most important people for you to meet are the people you're talking to on a day-to-day basis anyway.
And to add to Matt's point, and oftentimes when you sort of bring yourself to that networking and building those extra relationships, to take off that it feels more like work, is usually people that you actually enjoy doing things with. You either have some common interests, some similar likes, dislikes, such that it makes it where you actually enjoy building and developing the actual relationship. Which again, because you're right, the networking, the being intentional are all things that we have to do. And some people are great at it. Some people are not so great at it, but we do it, and you just have to do it. But it makes it a tad bit better when it's actually people that you enjoy doing things with. You actually have a genuine interest in that person. So that's why I say, in terms of the people that you are facing and interacting with, engaging with day in and day out, are usually some of the first people that you develop those kind of core relationships with.
Thank you. So I'm sure all of you all had virtual programs over the summer. So we have a question from a student who's asking, in a virtual networking session, and let's say a student is in a breakout room, how should they navigate? Let's say they're having a conversation with a particular attorney, and they're looking to wrap up that conversation and then have an opportunity to speak to a different attorney. It's a bit different on Zoom opposed to in person. You could kind of end the conversation and then walk over. So if Mr. Joyce, if you could start just some ideas for how students can, properly wrap up things on Zoom and then move on and speak to someone else.
Look, I think the thing to recognize is everybody realizes this format is awkward. So don't think that you have to be perfect in this format or that there is any such thing as perfection. We all, consistent with Matt, can't find our mute button or or fumbling through a million things. So I think just my starting piece of advice is be yourself about it. And look, all of us have been on and may simultaneously be on the other side of the table. And so I think you can be candid about, look, Eamon, I really enjoyed talking to you, but I was really hoping to get a couple minutes with Danielle. Great, cool. I too want to talk to some other people. There's no skin off my back at all. But being yourself, I think, is the easiest way to deal with that.
Another question in the queue is, what's the best way for a student to introduce themselves and their background? Let's say they're approaching an attorney who they don't have any connection to, i.e., they didn't attend the same law school, they're not an alumni, they don't have any mutual connections. How should a student go about approaching that situation and kind of make that first impression, or just get that conversation started? Danielle, feel free to answer if you have.
I don't know that there's a perfect science to it. I think it's perfectly okay. And I often get emails from people who, I don't at first glance have this, readily identifiable connection to. So I think it's perfectly okay to reach out and say, if depending on how you learned of the person, right? And so if someone referred them to you, then you might note that. If you attended a panel like this, that would be something. I mean, again, I don't know that there's a perfect science. I've had people who've just reached out and said, hey, I saw you on Latham's website. I think X, Y, and Z is interesting about what you do. Can you tell me more about the Black Lawyers Group at Latham? Can you tell me about the recruiting? I saw that you were a litigation associate. I think there are any number of ways to just reach out. And I don't think any of us would feel it weird or bizarre. And it certainly would not be the first time that we received an email from someone who, like I said, didn't have that kind of readily identifiable connection. So don't let that deter you.
So one student asks, so let's say they make initial contact through a panel like this, how do they keep that conversation? How do they keep their conversation going? Do you guys have any suggestions for how they should, approach that email? Should it be a phone call? Just some practical steps for them to take to further that conversation and perhaps let that lead into a mentorship situation or anything of this sort. We can start with Mr. Cooley.
So I would say, and I know everyone feels differently, I am not a fan of the cold calls, just because I think a lot of us, I get a lot of like non-work related calls that I ignore. So like if it's a cold call, I'm probably not going to pick up anyways. But I think an email saying, hi, Donald, and you definitely do not have to call me Mr. Cooley, but if you say, hi, Donald, you were on the NBLSA panel, just wanted to continue the conversation. I had this question, or I want to know more about your practice group or whatever. If you give us a prompt, we'll always respond. I think it's harder to say, hi, I heard on the panel, would like to talk more, best, Donald. Like that's a little hard to respond to. But if you have a prompt, I want to know more about Latham. I want to know more about practicing in the DC office. I want to know more about, how do I choose a practice group? Any of those kind of lead-ins are wonderful ways to begin. And I think the tail end of that question asked about mentorship. I think I know everyone approaches mentorship differently. I think mentorship kind of goes with networking, like it's more, you want it to be more of a natural thing. So it's not like, hey, be my mentor. It's kind of weird and awkward, but sure, someone can only say no. So if that's the route you want to go, but I would try to be a little bit more graceful with it. But perfectly fine to just say, I saw you on a call, as Daniel said, I saw you on LinkedIn and just want to follow up, is a great way to respond.
Another student asks, are there any questions they should avoid asking to attorneys? Mr. Graves.
So I hate giving an answer like this, but I mean, it's just almost like you just have to use common sense. You're obviously not going to, no one on participating in this panel is going to ask something like offensive, and short of like offensive questions, there really aren't questions to avoid. And I mean, don't worry as a law student about asking a question that you think might show that you don't know an area of law or you don't understand how the legal industry operates, because all of our working assumptions are that you really don't know much about the industry and you don't know much about the law, and that is totally perfectly acceptable and what we expect. It's better to ask questions now and to have a grasp of the questions that are nagging at you and an understanding of the way things work by the time you start. And the only way that's going to happen is if you ask the questions, because none of this stuff is intuitive.
Yeah, I mean, if I can just add one thing to Matt's good points. As I look back on it, and then as I see people go through the process, I'd say people err on the side of too few questions, not too many. Look, recruiting processes are as much about what you, the candidate, wants and needs as they are what I, as the hiring person, want and need. you know, both sides want a good fit. And I know that I fit at the institution where I've now worked for almost 20 years. You figuring out whether it's a good fit for you is going to require more questions. So don't be bashful about it.
Another question is, in short, how do we make conversations with associates and partners more meaningful instead of transactional, you know, where it appears like someone's looking for a recommendation or just some kind of insight? How can it make it more meaningful and let that build? And we can start with Ms. Roberson.
That's an interesting question. So I think, me personally, I tend to, aside from, you know, asking the basics of your practice, what you're doing, I would try to find ways to engage on the person's interest, right? What they do outside of just the practice of law. People enjoy talking on and on about what they do, whether it's family, whether it's nonprofit work, and really sort of get them engaging and talking about those aspects. And for me, that's also when you have an opportunity to sort of get to know the person, not just what they do. So I always look for, and you can be, you know, very straightforward. Like I'm looking for opportunities, or I like to do X, or, you know, aside from when you're not working and practicing, how do you spend your time? What do you like doing the most in your free time? Some may tell you I have no free time, right? But I think being very direct and clear and getting folks talking about sort of non-work things all the time is really a good way to get them engaged. And then you can start to actually share if there's any commonalities or things that you have thought about based on whatever they're doing. Is a way to really get people going, engaged, and sort of move beyond the what's your practice area, what, you know, which law school you went to. And then you also learn things, right? You may learn that you lived on the same street when, you know, you met your grandmother. You just never know. But once you start talking and getting folks, you know, blood flowing, things just kind of go. So that would be my suggestion.
If anyone else has anything to add, feel free.
I have one small addition, which is I don't think anyone should view any of these interactions as a failing of any sort if they don't go that far. Like sometimes you hit it off with people, sometimes you don't. I think when I was in law school, I know when I was in law school, I thought of things as very binary, right? Firm X seemed good, firm Y seemed bad, but we're all just people, and you'll hit it off with some of the people that you network with, and the relationships will become deeper and more meaningful. And then some people, you're just going to learn some tidbits here and there, and that's totally fine from both sides. Like don't overthink it. You know, not everybody in your law school class is somebody you hit it off with. Yet there hopefully are some people you really do, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Totally agree.
Yeah, the only thing I would add that I've thought as I've listened to these great answers is, you know, the other thing that can help, I think, if what intimidates you about networking is what am I going to say when I get to this conference, when we're back in a world where there are such a thing as conferences, or, you know, what am I going to say in these Zoom things? You know, what I think is really helpful is to have whatever works for you, but a pre-baked list of questions in your mind that you're going to ask to try to prompt a conversation. And like Lily was saying, you'll eventually hit on something that'll allow you to go deeper. So if like one of your questions is, where are you from originally? And it's like, oh, you're from Pennsylvania? I'm from Pennsylvania too. What part? And then you're off to the races. I think if you have a plan coming into these conversations when you're talking to someone cold or new, it makes the whole thing less intimidating. And, you know, like was said, if you don't hit it off, by the time you've worked your way through your questions, you've had a respectable 5 to 10 minute conversation and you move it along to the next person.
Following up on that, so we talked a bit about sending emails, and you know sometimes attorneys will take a while to respond. What protocol should students use in terms of, let's say you sent an email out today following up on this event, and now it's been a week or 2 weeks. Should they follow up and send another email? Any tips for or best practice for how you think students should respond in that situation? Ms. Roby.
You called on me? Sorry.
You might have-
um, I personally believe, and I went to some marketing sales pitch program a couple years back, and they were saying how letting conversations go stale after about 7 days. So if you don't do anything within like a 7 day window, the person really, it's for naught. I always think it's not offensive, not insulting if you just do a follow up, right? You can send another email saying, "Hi, I know you're busy, just checking in on the following. Please let me know when you have a moment to chat." I mean, whether that's don't do it day two, but between day 5 and 7, if you hadn't heard, ping me again. Like I said, honestly, I'm usually grateful. Like, oh, great, thank you. So sorry about that. So I always say, just ping me. Like, and I'm not offended. Usually I'm like, okay, great. And it kind of reminds me and puts me back and follow along, make sure that I actually get back. So I think it's perfectly acceptable to and I did it when I was in law school. Hell, I do it now. Sometimes you have to follow up people, particularly given the sort of world we're in now, where there's a lot of different moving parts and things going on. So I personally say you just ping them back with a sort of checking in on this. Happy to talk at your convenience and leave it at that, and then just kind of continue from there.
Donald, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's right. I think, in giving people the time to sometimes you don't know what the other person might be out of the office for a bit, or they might be in the midst of a really huge trial or a big closing. And so definitely follow up, because it might just be that your email may have accidentally just dropped to the bottom of their inbox and they haven't gotten to it. So, I even do that now when I'm actually working with senior associates or partners. I'll say, hey, bringing this back to the top of your inbox just to make sure that they saw it. So I think it's definitely, and it also shows that you're being proactive and you're actually taking the time out, and it's not just something that you're doing by chance. So I think it won't hurt at all.
Yeah, I echo all that. And I will tell you, this is advice that I follow in my practice. It is a mistake to just send one email and then not get a response and assume that the person doesn't want to speak with you. You should always, at a minimum, follow up one time at least within that kind of 1 week period that Lilia was talking about, from when you sent your initial email, just to make sure it didn't get lost. Because we're all busy people, we have a lot of things going on, and we can very much intend to get back to you, but it just gets lost, as Donald was saying, in the email box.
So that treads well. We have a few questions about what type of interns and associates are likely to be successful at your respective firms. You all have talked a bit about that proactiveness in terms of, seeking what you want, reaching out to people, not being bashful. So can you all talk about what you've seen, what led you to be successful as, as an intern, as an associate, now as partners, for those of you who are, and then for your colleagues around you, just some attributes that you found to be worthwhile in terms of that you think students should keep. We can start with Mr. Joyce.
Were you calling on me? Sorry, I didn't miss the name.
Yeah, you can go first. No problem. No worries.
I wasn't sure if it was Mr. Joyce or Mr. Graves. Sorry. So, I think going back a few questions, one of the more common mistakes I see is people like not asking enough questions at the outset. We understand that it's just part of the process for summer associates and even junior associates that we're going to be in teaching mode. And there's not much from like a practical perspective, as smart and wonderful and driven as you all are, that you really know how to do on day one. But we don't know what we don't know. We need you to ask questions when you have questions, and not be so concerned that you speculate about what you're supposed to do, and then you go off and you generate some kind of work product that completely misses the mark. I think that's like the most common mistake that I've seen. But the people that are successful are constantly trying to put forth their best work product possible, engaging and asking questions, making sure that they understand the assignments. And when you have a real understanding of the assignment, if you're being asked to do 2 discrete tasks, to say, here are the answers to your discrete tasks, but based on my understanding of what you're looking for, I've also thought about this other issue over here. To the extent you can go beyond and really add value, now you're really making yourself an incredibly valuable member of the team.
Mr. Joyce.
Yeah, I'll echo a lot of what Matt just said. The advice I feel like I find myself giving the most to juniors and to summers is not to put themselves in a box, not to see themselves as kind of a cog in a machine, but really to put themselves out there, essentially what we're all paid for in this profession, no matter how junior we are, or how senior we are, is to make judgment calls. And the earlier you start doing that and taking ownership over those calls, the more you get past kind of the embarrassment and intimidation curve and make yourself valuable. You just see your tasks in a different way. You see your role in a case or in a project rather than just answering what you've been asked to do. And look, that's been, you know, this dovetails with the other part of the question. I think as I look back on it, I tried to really take ownership of my work and not just deliver the question or the answer to the question that I was asked, but to try to deliver a complete piece of work product every time, something that was essentially filing ready or client presentation ready. And I think that goes hand in hand with what I'm talking about in terms of how people can stand out.
Mr. Cooley.
Yeah, I think obviously what everyone has said is correct. I think a good piece of advice I was given as a junior associate was, you know, we have external clients, but we also have internal clients. And so the associates that you're working for, are you kind of helping them get the work product done that they need? And so a little bit of common sense, you know, if you're sending something, a question, for example, is like, okay, well, is this helpful? Is this going to be something that is confusing? Have I thought through this? Am I asking a question that I could Google first before saying, hey, do you know what X is? Am I organizing my questions, or am I just firing off questions as they come to me? I think different things about making the person above you life easier, at least for me, has proven to be really helpful. Deal work especially, I think a lot of times being a junior is about being available and being, you know, inquisitive and wanting to be a team player and wanting to learn. And I always say that I'm more worried when juniors leave my office and they don't ask questions, because then I'm like, okay, I know I've missed something, because I know what I was like as a first year. I had tons of questions. And so I think just being available, being open and honest about what you need to know, and just being a sponge, being willing to learn, and then also making sure that you're making the people above you, both your external clients as well as your internal clients' lives easier, I think are really good stepping stones to being a good associate.
I agree. I'll say two things. First, one of my favorite questions or type of questions that I get from summer associates is after I've given them a discrete assignment, they ask how that discrete assignment fits into the bigger picture, right? When you all are summers, before you all get to the firm, we all carve out things that are easy for you all to do, recognizing that you're not going to be with us longer than, you know, a 2-month span that summer, right? But the summer associates who ask me how things fit into the bigger picture, get more interested and engaged in the case, or the matter rather, when they come back, those are the ones that I want to staff as my juniors, right? Because they understand how their piece of work fit into the bigger picture. They took the extra effort to get engaged in the case, understand, again, how their piece of the puzzle fits. And so I always say that that's good practice. And then building off of Donald's point, look at when you're summers, look at what the junior associates, especially the good ones, are doing, right? And see if there are ways that you can help them and make their lives easier. So if you go to a meeting and you see that the junior associate had printed out the agendas and brought copies, right, for everyone in the meeting, maybe at the next meeting, before the next meeting, you ask, hey, Danielle, is there anything you need me to print? Any resources I can bring for the group? That's one less thing on my to-do list, right? And that is something that really shows that you're paying attention and kind of taking the initiative to be helpful and make things easier for your immediate supervisors.
And I don't want to repeat all of what they said, because I agree with everything that everyone said, particularly the ownership piece. The only one piece that I would add in terms of what's been said is being responsive. I think you can be all those great, wonderful things, taking ownership to great work product, but when you are not responsive to some folks that is a highly pet peeve, such that they will not work with you any longer, because it's just a matter of, if they have to chase you to get something done or sort of a check-in or check-up, that will spoil a true cat. So I would add to everything else in terms of just being highly responsive.
I will jump back in to say I'll double down on that. I mean, I say, look, I say
Crippling.
I say to summers and juniors all the time, look, I at baseline, everybody we work with is talented and good. But if you give me the person that's, let's say, 70% versus whatever, the best person is 100%. If they're 70% in technical skills, but 100% in responsiveness, attitude, etc., give me that person 100 times out of 100 who's 100 in technical skills, but 80% in those intangibles. Like it is hard to overstate how complex one's life becomes as a partner, not to mention as a parent to a first grader who's on virtual school. And the people who make my life easier are the people I want to be working with. It's that simple.
So I have a question specifically for Donald and Danielle. So the question is, as young associates and as you progressed at the firm, how did you get comfortable with going to a partner or a senior associate and just being able to say that you didn't know or you didn't fully understand what was being asked of you? How did you go about doing that?
Thanks. So when I was a junior associate, I was taught to always kind of repeat my assignment back to my supervisor. And so, we'd be in the partner or the senior associate's office and they'll tell me, I need you to draft this particular document. And I would say, oh, okay, so you want me to make this particular change and this particular change. And they'll say, oh, no, I meant for you to do X, Y, and Z. I think it's really helpful, especially when you're first starting out, to get as much clarity as possible. Because, just speaking as we've all talked about making things easier, it's going to be a lot easier for me to take the extra 10 minutes to make sure that you understand what I know that I want you to do than if you don't tell me and then you go and do, 30 pages of something that I didn't need for you to do that I now have to review and then we have to start back over again. So I would always say, repeating back your assignments. If there's, whenever I was on calls, I would write down words that I didn't understand from the calls. And so I would say, hey, do you have a few minutes after this call? You mentioned this weird jargon, this word, you're like, what does that mean? Obviously, sometimes they might be too busy to do it in the meeting, but, sending an email and saying, hey, I just want to make sure that I'm doing this right. My advice I always give my juniors also is if it takes you longer than like 10 or 15 minutes to figure out at your desk, just send me an email or call me and then we can figure a time for us to kind of redirect. I definitely don't want you to be, hours and hours on end, you're going down the drain and then you come back, you're like, here, I did it. And it's the absolute opposite. So I definitely feel like you will get a lot more grace for, being the person that asks a lot of questions, being the person that raises their hand and says, wait a minute, I don't know, than trying to kind of just figure it out on your own.
Okay, and so I'm sorry, Jalen, I think I missed a part of your question. Do you mind repeating that for me?
The question was, how did you get comfortable, as a younger associate, how did you get comfortable going to a senior associate or even a partner and saying that you didn't understand, what your assignment was? Instead of, like Donald mentioned, spending 30 hours doing something that they didn't need, how did you get comfortable being able to say, I'm not particularly sure. Can you sit down and perhaps re-explain it to me?
Got it. So yeah, I echo everything Donald said. That I would try my best to leave their office, having asked all of my clarifying questions prior to, and leave the office thinking at least that I had an understanding of what needed to get done. But I would often, especially when I first started at the firm, go back to my office, sit with the materials for a little bit and send a clarifying email, right? So I would send an email to the extent I had any additional questions. And even if I didn't, I would just send an email saying, thanks for taking the time to chat with me today. Just want to confirm my understanding of the assignment and the deadlines, the needs, what have you. And the great thing about that is if they say, when you've written it out, they'll be able to see it and say, oh, wait, no, that part, not what I meant. I want you to do this. They'll clarify, or you'll get confirmation. And then also, if it comes down to researching something, right? If I'm getting a couple hours into it and I'm seeing that I'm not really finding anything, I don't wait until we're, minutes before the deadline to tell them that, right? I'm starting early on and saying, hey, I'm only about an hour and a half into this, but I'm not finding much on point. Here's what I am finding, and here's what I have done. Welcome your thoughts on other research avenues you might think fruitful. Happy to discuss, and that creates kind of the opportunity for them to tell me, like, you're going down a rabbit hole, you're pursuing something completely different, or you know what, I think you've done what you can do, and we'll pivot together. To Donald's point, now that I'm in a place where I'm supervising junior associates, I would much rather you ask questions. I would much rather you be upfront and tell me that you don't understand, that you don't know, that you're not having luck, that I've told you something is going to take you 3 hours. It's looking like it's going to take you 6. All of those things are things I want to know, and know early rather than later. So once I was supervising and realized what I wanted from juniors, that kind of took some of the pressure off me when I had to, say those same things to my supervisor.
And just a quick note on that, with timing and deadlines, just be upfront with your supervisor. And when I say that, I don't mean like, I asked for it at noon on Tuesday and you tell me at 11:50 you're not going to get there. But, if you're struggling and you see it's Friday or whatever, you like, there's no way I'm going to meet this deadline. We all understand that life happens, things come up, other demands, other deals or cases come up. So I think being open and honest with your supervisors as well about kind of your time and the realistic, because a lot of times your supervisor might forget how long it might take you, especially first starting out. I could probably do it in an hour, but it might take you 4 hours. So I think being able to have those real conversations can set you up for success.
And one thing I would add on that point is when if it looks like I can't get the full project to the person in the time that, we initially discussed, I at least offer like, oh, is it okay if I get this to you on a rolling basis, right? So I'm still working on drafting this. Is it okay for me to get you this first section, and while you're reviewing in parallel, I'll continue churning on this other part? But to Donald's point, that's a discussion that you want to have earlier rather than later. You don't want to present someone with that problem, an hour or two before the deadline.
Thank you. Okay, so in closing, I will ask each attorney to leave our students with some parting words as most of us close up this unprecedented semester and start to really get into the job hunting process. So I would just love for you all to just leave it with some words of encouragement or whatever you just want to share with them that they should carry forward over the next few weeks. And we can start with our attorneys from DLA Piper, followed by Latham, and then we'll end with Mr. Joyce.
Go ahead, Philip. You can start.
I was going to suggest that you start, Matt. No, that's fine. I'm gonna keep it short because I know we've said a lot tonight, and folks were here a lot over the time. One of the things that I would say is be yourself, right? In this process, be yourself. I would also say to be courageous. Oftentimes we will doubt ourselves. We will not want to do things that we think we should be doing and question ourselves. Trust yourself, right? And trust the process. Oftentimes you know a whole lot more than what you think you know. And if you're helpful, insightful, the path will actually come. So I always say, trust yourself, be brave, because this is definitely a daunting area. But be yourself and sort of just go for it, and you will find that it's actually a much more manageable process when you do that.
So I would just say, and this kind of goes back to something I was saying earlier, is just be open to opportunities, right? And don't think that at any point in your career, because I certainly have not hit that point yet, that there is going to be some perfect plan and you're going to know exactly what happens next and who is going to be instrumental in getting you to that point. I think it's just way more like chaos theory, and you do better the more people you meet, the more people and opportunities you open yourself up to, because you really don't know, and you will be surprised over the course of your career how many times it's someone that you didn't think was going to in any way be doing something for you that's actually the one that's putting you in the position to get that key job or that key engagement. And the more people you meet, the more chances you have for that random connection to really do something to alter the trajectory of your career.
So I will start by saying that you are all brilliant and capable, and any employer would be lucky to have you. But following in the theme of being open and being true to yourself, use this opportunity to find a place with that you have that fitness, right? Like you fit. Just as much as we are looking for good candidates, you should be looking for a good place to start your career, right? And so make sure that the questions that you're asking, the people that you're speaking to, you're taking the opportunity to determine whether this firm, this clerkship, that wherever is for you. Because I think more than anything, that's going to be where you do your best, where you feel like you fit. So yeah, so don't just worry about, selling yourself to the firm. Make sure that that's a firm where you want to be, and try to do your due diligence in that respect by talking to as many people as will have you, and by attending events like this where you meet people from those different firms. Take the opportunity to really vet these places.
So yeah, my advice would just be to remember that this whole law school big law process is a marathon and not a sprint. There are definitely going to be a number of different milestones and goals that you are working towards, and you need to trust that whatever has gotten you to this point will carry you through the rest and the remaining parts as well. You're going to hear a lot of information from both panelists, from your classmates, and we all have different paths. And so I think you have to be able to realize that, you are going to need to figure out what works for you. Everyone's personality is different. Everyone's goals are different. So, I don't think you have to take everything you hear as gospel. I remember being in law school and being so confused because I felt like there was just a flood of advice coming in and I didn't know how to do it all, and you don't have to do it all. I think, taking from these panels and finding tools that fit your personality, that are easy for you to kind of use at your disposal, that's going to be how you succeed.
Danielle said most of what I would have said. Honestly, she could have, if I'd written out notes, she may have read off of them. I try to boil those same things down, and it's just, I say this all the time to people who come through in interviews and then summers I work with, just go with your gut. Don't worry that your classmate thinks place X is the greatest place on earth. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. You'll figure it out. And then the other piece of advice I say that cuts in the opposite direction in a weird way is, while you want the first big career choice to be right, also don't fret if it's not. People move, people's lives change, their careers change. So go with your gut, but don't overanalyze this. You'll be okay. And you can make your way out of an initial decision that turns out to be not the right one.
Well, thank you all. I know I certainly appreciate you all for joining us. I know our students took a lot away from this. I appreciate you taking the time away from your friends, family. Could have been doing anything on this Thursday evening. So I'm extremely grateful. Look forward to having some of your colleagues on our next panel discussing best practices for interviews. So again, really appreciate you taking the time to invest in our students and share what you can, and look forward to seeing you all in the future. Stay well and happy holidays to you all.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
you.